Okay. Bienvenue and welcome, everyone, to the first official debate of the Alberta NDP Leadership Race 2024. You can make some noise for that. Yes. Folks, we'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains, and we pay respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The city of Lethbridge is also home to the Otipemisiwak government, Métis government, District 1. Welcome to the city of Lethbridge. Yes, come on, make some noise. I'm Jeff Carlson, and as a proud member of Lethbridge City Council, I'm even more proud to be here today to welcome all of you to this beautiful Yates Theatre in the third largest, but first bestest city in Alberta. And I am thrilled that the contestants vying for the next Alberta NDP leader are holding their very first debate here in Lethbridge, because in my opinion, the key to building a better future for our province begins right here in Lethbridge, the gateway to opportunity. I know we're all looking forward to a great debate tonight. The candidates are ready to debate their thoughtful proposals and insights, and to show all of you and all of Alberta that the NDP is ready to build a better future starting today. Before we begin, I'd like to invite our moderator, Loa Beebe, to provide an introduction to Elder Travis Plaited Hair, who will be providing the prayer for tonight. Loa?
Oki idamix gunatani. I'm so happy to be here today, and Sokotoki is what us Blackfoots call the city of Lethbridge. At this time, I would like to introduce Kinnimatsiman, Elder Travis Plaited Hair. Travis is from the Blood Kainai Reserve that just is on the west side of Lethbridge, and currently he is serving in a governance role as an elected member of the Blood Tribe Chief and Council. I'm very honored that I called on him today and that he is here. Travis is dedicated to building positive communities based in the teachings of the Sitsagate the Blackfoot way of life. And this evening, I will be giving him tobacco as our cultural protocol. I've also provided him with an honorarium, and I'm very thankful to have him here tonight.
Okay, I'm sure all of you can say okay, so everybody say okay. All right, well, we're gonna add over the years we're gonna add more phrases to that. So pretty soon you'll all be speaking Blackfoot. As my elder said, I learned your language, so I'm sure you can learn mine. Anyways, I'm very honored to be asked to say the opening prayer for this evening. I'm really looking forward to it. Being involved in politics the last 4 years, I always tell, what are you doing now? I says, well, I entered the dark side. No, I'm just kidding. But I did spend 10 years of my adult life as leader of our Sacred Horn Society on the Blood Reserve, which is another real honor that I was able to serve our not only our community, but the whole region, all of us in Alberta and Canada. When we pray for everyone. We never exclude anybody. And so, yeah. And it's good. I consider Lethbridge home. I've lived and worked in the city of Lethbridge for many years. But I finally was eligible for a house back home on the res. So I'm back on the res on the north side, and but my grandchildren still go to school here. Both my boys live here in the city of Lethbridge. So Lethbridge has always been home to us, and I've had the privilege and honor of working with most of our mayors over the years in different projects. As you know, we all have issues, social issues that we're all dealing with, and they can be solved when everybody works together. So once again, in my prayer, I'm going to praying obviously for all of us here and our homes and where we work and the things that we get up in the morning to achieve, that we achieve those. We also pray for our leaders. Whether you agree or disagree with our leaders, you follow them and you support them so that they do a good job. And tonight I'm looking forward to listening to the individuals here and what their perspective is on the future of the greatest province in all the world, right? And I might even say a little prayer for the Edmonton Oilers. I don't know. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all enjoy the debate today. And you don't have to stand, you remain seated, and you don't have to take your hat off. I've never seen the old guys take their headdresses off. So I'll do my prayer. Obviously, I'll be praying in the Blackfoot language. Ayo napi natus, ayo kukumikis, ayo pisawati o pakti pisawati. Ayo tsahkumitapi. Ayo nisana ko kia kayaps tinyamana. O kinuka pastakakya ka kinuka takuya ka ki annuma ka ki kanuhsin nanya ka ki. Anu sikuh kotokiwa ka kiniki tupiwa ka ki. Amatso ki nitis ka istaya ka ki makako patu siya ka ki anika ki nina bukdaksin ka ki. O kikimma tu sawa ka ki ako kitamanis sawa ka kinika kumkta tsipu ispia ka ki. Aki ka ki maksawa ka ki. Anya tsoki noka stakatan na ka ki nokawat tsipyo kinana no tsakkuya ka ki. O kinistun na ka ki sitsikets tapia ka ki. Matumi tapia ka ki nokatas stakatan na nokatokpuk ka pukupi man na ka ki. O giakoh kana isuka pisiwa ka ki instawa pisiak. O ginit noka kama ukaman istamoa ka ki ano ka ki ipstopio ka ki ano kuya ka ki takuya. O kuwa sakais siya ka kaksuwa patsi siya ka ki. Kawan stokku simaksa ka. O kutapu taksinakais sinima ni simatas sinima sa. Oku suat susku suat tapimu asakah sapis saka kino sikuh kutukya. Kimma tu saka. O kinita pu taksinanya ciktayi ka pumakah pinanan ni kaki muhsukuya kaki. Nakseita pohpi spinan, nakseita pohkuy spinan. Akita masku takay sinanya ka. Anino kanista pokamanstuma. O gata taptawa ako pa kanika ki sasima kuya kaki mokuwansin. Anak kaki umakanak sa ki its kinait sa ki mautu ki its kanatsumitat sa o ki kakuits o ki its yaneps kat sa ki kaneps kat sa ki yakuin naman sa o kinitsi o kat sa. Annaka ki nakitami takiya ka kanika ki sitsikets tapi pa tapi sinamatu siman. Ako na suka pesatsi tami toki kahpinan itumma sinan. Anisay na kanistakaman. O nakatsis tapakunakaman istamakan nakutapi sinan. Annikaki ko na suka. Ki pipustoy ki pipipuya kaki kamatani kaki istawatsiman. Han. So you could take your right hand, put it on your chest, and just say, hey. And that's just acknowledging to the elder that you have accepted their prayer. And I'll have a can out front. You can drop a few dollars in there. Thank you, Sikoh, to enjoy this evening. Han.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Thank you, Travis. And now, I'm pleased to reintroduce to you the moderator for tonight's debate, Loa Bibi. Loa is a proud member of the Piikani and Kainai Nations of the Blackfoot Confederacy and Treaty 7 here in southern Alberta. She's recognized for her work in public relations, advocacy, governance, media, strategy, and communications. Loa is a speaker, facilitator, advisor, consultant, and trainer. Loa was educated right here in Lethbridge at the Lethbridge Community College and as well at Cape Breton University. She is very active in the community as a volunteer and an advocate for Indigenous rights in Canada. Please welcome Loa Beebe. You get to stand here while I introduce the candidates. Sorry. And now let's get right to it. Let's meet our candidates tonight. Their positions on the stage tonight and the order in which they will be answering any questions has been randomly selected. So please welcome to the stage MLA for Edmonton Glenora, Sarah Hoffman. MLA for Calgary Mountain View, Kathleen Ganley. Former Mayor of Calgary, Naheed Nenshi. President of the Alberta Federation of Labour, Gil McGowan. And MLA for Edmonton Rutherford, Jody Calahoo Stonehouse. Candidates, thank you again for joining us for this very important debate tonight. Best of luck to all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Jeff, come back. I just want to, if you guys could give him a round of applause. We're not going to see.
Way to go, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do here in Sigokatoki. I was telling him, we were talking backstage, and I was telling him I was born here, so it's nice to be back. So thank you, everybody. And Oki, Nistuaniko Gnatuisa Ogasam. Bigani Nadokdotu Giyagana. I'd like to welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome those elders, community members, friends, and everyone that has come out tonight, and also those that are online. I am very honored and excited to be here tonight to moderate tonight's debate. I look forward to a thoughtful and respectful exchange of ideas, as well as any chance that we could hear more about who we are from the candidates, what drives you, and what leadership style that you like. So before we begin this evening, I'll just let you know we had thousands of Alberta NDP supporters who wrote in to suggest questions for each of the candidates. The party then came together and developed questions that will be asked this evening, along with the themes that were chosen: Alberta's economic future and how the NDP can unite and win 2027. So we will begin with 2-minute opening statements from each of our candidates. As well, after that, we will go through 3 questions for each candidate to provide a 1-minute answer. We'll then follow up with a 2-minute debate. Now, candidates, be careful. We do not want to hear you talk over each other too much. I also, again, ask that the candidates please respect the time that you have been allotted. I've been reminding them this evening. And the last 5 questions, we will have different combinations of 3 candidates at a time. So they will answer a question, 1 minute to answer. We will then have 90 seconds for an open debate and rebuttals among the 3 candidates. During this section, if a candidate is not one of the 3 candidates debating the question, they have the option of using 2 chances to rebut and weigh in and have the final word. So finally, we will end the debate with the 90-second closing statements from each of the candidates. So we'll begin with opening statements and end with closing statements. Because we have limited time, we ask that the audience hold their applause until each question has been debated. Please do not heckle or make any sounds to disrupt the debate while candidates are answering questions. And thank you for this in advance. Now, are we ready to hear from the candidates?
Yes.
So thank you and good luck. As Councillor Carlson said, the candidates' position on stage today is in the order in which they will answer questions that were randomly drawn. So pre this, we had a couple meetings, and they actually did a draw in the orders that they will be answering and in the orders that they came out. That's how it was chosen. So we had a pre-meeting. We also gave the rules of order and reminded this evening before we started this evening. Now we will start with opening statements, and this evening we will start with Gil McGowan. Gil, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thanks, Laura. Alberta New Democrats are united on two things. First, we're all laser focused on the need to win in 2027. Second, we all agree that winning means getting more people inside the NDP tent. But before we can grow the tent, we need to understand who's outside the tent and why they are outside. We all know about the problems we have outside of Edmonton and Calgary, but polling tells us another important story. The other missing piece in our coalition is workers. We win among university-educated voters who describe themselves as middle class and who live in big cities. But we're losing among voters who describe themselves as working class and who have high school, college, and trades educations. There are two big reasons why working class voters and voters outside the big cities aren't voting for us. First, they think we suck at the economy. In particular, they think we would kill the oil and gas industry. Second, and this is a hard truth we have to face, they often think we're a bunch of sanctimonious, overeducated urban snobs who look down on them. We are and we need to remain the party of education, healthcare, and human rights, but in order to win over Albertans outside of our tent, we also have to become the party of wage growth, the party of affordability, and the party with a compelling economic plan to build our prosperity in a changing world, a plan which I have. We also have to counteract the impression that we're a party that excludes or looks down upon working class people and people outside the cities. Our future depends on us becoming more Tim Hortons and less Starbucks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gil. Next, we have Sarah Hoffman. Please go ahead with your opening statement.
I'm Sarah Hoffman. I'm fat, I'm sassy, and I have a really hard time pretending to be somebody that I'm not. Some of the pundits say there isn't a spot for me in politics. They also say that the NDP can't win in Southern Alberta. But they were wrong about that. We've proven it 3 times in a row, and they were wrong about me too. The first time I ran for public office was in 2010. I ran for the Edmonton Public School Board on a bold platform of standing up for community schools, and I ran against an incumbent. I ran, and I won. I ran again, and I won again, and those schools are still open. When I ran for the NDP the first time, I also ran against an incumbent, a Conservative cabinet minister in what was considered a Conservative stronghold. But it was too important to sit on the sidelines. So we ran on a bold policy platform of increasing corporate taxes to ensure that we protected public health care and public education. We ran, we won, and we protected those nurses, those teachers, those kids, and those patients. We win when we are unapologetic about being New Democrats. We win when we stand up for our values. We've proven that time and time again. So I'm running on a bold platform of healthcare, climate, and housing. It's not okay that nearly half of the people who live in Lethbridge don't have a family doctor. I was the health minister. I absolutely can bring 1,000 doctors here. I've worked with the experts to develop a plan, and I'm ready to implement it. So let's be bold. Let's elect a new Democrat as the leader of the NDP, and let's run on an NDP platform of healthcare, climate, and housing, and be unapologetic about who we are. I'm ready. I'm so proud to run as your leader, and I will make you proud if you elect me leader, and then we get to form the next government. I will be an unapologetic NDP premier, and we will be the province that we all deserve. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we have Jody Calahoo Stonehouse. Please go ahead with your opening statement.
Okay. Thank you, Travis, for the prayer. And what I heard in that prayer was, on the ballot, choose Jody Calahoo Stonehouse. So thank you. I appreciate that medicine. It's good to be with you, my relatives. It's good to be with you, New Democrats. As a young girl, my grandfather Napoleon took me out on the trap line, and he would share with me the stories about the connection between the river, the beavers, and the hawks, and the mice, and the rabbits, and how the ecosystem and the biodiversity are connected and how they need each other. And as a young girl, he taught me that I have eagle vision, which means you have to fly above to see how all the systems work together. And so I've spent the past 2 decades looking at ways in which our justice system, our child welfare system, our health system, how they work and how they don't work. I want to thank all of you at home and across the province who've shared hundreds of stories of where you're feeling a struggle, where you're feeling frustrated, and how we can build a better Alberta for our children. Nobody wants smoky summers. Nobody wants to go without water, which is why it's fundamental that the work we do has to be about water. Every economic system in this province is reliant on water, whether it's hydrogen, oil and gas, irrigation, every single thing we do is on water. Water is life. So our governance must reflect our values, which is water, economic stability, and our children. I look forward to being with you tonight and with my colleagues, and we will debate.
Thank you. Thank you, Jody. Next, we have Nahid Nenshi. Go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you, Loa. Oki nitsugwa nitsuwano kabesto chispistis. My Blackfoot is not very good, but I don't think I heard him say quite that, Jody. But thank you so much to Elder Travis for bringing us together. It was his dad, Pete Standing Alone, who gave me that name that I just mispronounced. It means clan leader, he who moves camp and the others follow. And today, I am deeply, deeply grateful for that charge, but I'm grateful for a lot of other things. I'm grateful for all of you. I'm grateful for all of you for being here to really talk about the future we want for this place we love so much. I'm incredibly grateful to these 4 people on stage with me, these brilliant leaders from whom I'm learning every day. And I'm grateful that I get to live here, that like all of us, we get to live in this magnificent, blessed place. But in addition to being grateful, I'm a little surprised that I'm back at this. I'm a little surprised that I'm back in politics. I was enjoying my retirement, but I'm an Albertan. I grew up here. I chose to make my life here after living and working all over the world in my 20s. And like all of you, I'm deeply troubled by the direction of our province and the direction of our government. At perhaps the most fraught time in modern human history, we need a government that is smart, that is pragmatic. We have a government that is reckless, that is dangerous, that is immoral, and that is incompetent. So this isn't for fun anymore. It is an absolute necessity for the future of our province to be able to win this next election. And the Alberta NDP, today's Alberta NDP, has the values, has the ethics, has the policy that Albertans believe in, and that is why we will win the next election.
Thank you, Nahid. Next, we have Kathleen Ganley. Go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you, Loa. And thank you to the people of Lethbridge for hosting us here tonight in Blackfoot territory. Friends, my name is Kathleen Ganley. I am running to be leader of Alberta's NDP and the next premier of this province. I'm a lawyer, a mother, a bit of a nerd, As minister, I worked on a lot of files. I even legalized pot. You're welcome. I am a person with ideas. I want my daughter to have the same opportunities that I had growing up here. I think that's what every parent wants. But right now, under the UCP, that isn't the world we are building. Crisis in healthcare, families that can't afford their mortgages, overcrowded classrooms, a government so busy reaching for the past, they can't even see the future. The UCP like to tell us a story. They tell us that giving more to our bosses will make our lives better. They tell us that when times are tough, it's our kids and our seniors who have to pay the price. And they tell us that we can either take action on climate change or care about the economy. But the story has a weakness. It isn't true. We can fight back against that old UCP narrative with a new and better one about how we can grow the economy by giving more to those who have less, about how every dollar invested in education saves 6 more, about how the economy is about people. We can build a better world for our kids. We can change hearts and minds. But there are no shortcuts. It takes hard work in every corner of this province. I will build a team that can fight back against that old UCP narrative in every one of the 87 ridings. That's why I am the best person to lead this team into 2027. We fight back with the truth. We fight back with real, concrete ideas. We fight back relentlessly. Our kids deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you to all the candidates for your opening statement. Now, let's begin with our very first question. I want to remind the candidates you have 1 minute each to respond. So today, as we drove into Lethbridge, it is not hard to see that many of our rivers and creeks are low. Down the road at Pincher Creek, the municipality is actually spending millions of dollars hauling water to ensure that the community has enough water. Across our province, community leaders are holding emergency meetings to talk about their water supply. Seeding has started in southern Alberta, and farmers are concerned if there will be enough moisture for seeding. What policies will you implement to address climate change and its immediate impacts on water for towns, farms, Indigenous communities, and all the businesses that rely on secure water supply? And we'll begin with Sarah.
Thanks so much for the question. As you heard, climate is one of my 3 key pillars: health, climate, and housing. When I think about southern Alberta, especially the Forgotten Corner and Medicine Hat, I've been there a number of times over the winter, and it was the driest I've ever seen it. We know that catastrophic drought is on the horizon, and it's important that we make sure that we prioritize how we allocate water licenses. So right now, it's usually whoever's got the deepest pockets and got to the front of the line first. What it needs to be is human need number 1, crops number 2, agriculture number 3, and industry number 4. We need to put our priorities back on track. So that's in terms of the water allocation piece. I'm going to take this moment, though, to also talk about one of the other pieces within my climate plan, which is around creating a youth climate corps. Because young people are desperate to take climate action, and they want to be part of the solution. So I'm picking up on something that Biden and Harris are introducing south of the border and trying to bring those same opportunities here for young people to help us fight climate change, support a strong economy, and reduce the cost of everyone's electricity bills.
Oh, if you could just hold your applause till we finish the question and the debate. Thank you so much. Kathleen?
So, like so many of you, my daughter had to stay inside this summer because there is so much smoke filling the air. We have increasing problems with smoke. We're facing a record drought in this province. We absolutely must take action. Our kids deserve it. In order to move forward on climate change, we need to bring people with us. That means we need to show that energy and the environment can be a yes and conversation, and they absolutely can. I have a concrete plan to do that. Some of the things I've talked about are ensuring that we say no to coal mining in our mountains, which uses precious water for things that we don't need it for. Another one is reviewing the Alberta Energy Regulator and the way they regulate our industry, because Albertans are the economy. People are the economy, and we must protect them first. Thank you.
Naheed, please hold your...
Thank you for that question. Lucky or not, I know a fair bit about the watershed in southern Alberta. flood and drought. And so I'll answer your question in two pieces. The first is the overall climate change file. It's very clear that the UCP government does not care about climate change. They say they believe in net zero by 2050, but consistently say no to every single thing that will get us to net zero by 2050. They're just kicking the ball down the field. And we need a smart, thoughtful, made in Alberta climate plan to reduce emissions now. But none of that is going to make a difference this summer in the drought. And the conversations that the UCP is having around intrabasin transfers and so on are just papering over the problem. We need to have serious investment in upstream flood mitigation and reservoir work on the Bow River, for example. 15 years since the flood hasn't happened yet. But we also need to ensure that we're building the water storage we need in times of drought, as well as the protection in times of flood.
Gil?
Thanks. We can't have a conversation about climate change in Alberta without having a conversation about oil and gas. We have 12% of the population in the country. We produce 40% of the emissions. In total, we produce 240 megatons. 140 of that comes from the oil and gas industry. So if we want to make our contribution to reducing emissions, we have to have the conversation with the oil and gas industry. As part of my economic plan, I put a proposal forward that would allow us to pivot our oil and gas sector away from producing for fuels to producing for materials, which would help us create jobs and reduce emissions. This is the kind of creative approach that needs to be taken to safeguard our industry while at the same time safeguarding our environment and doing our part as a province to reduce emissions.
Jody?
The first policy I released was the Alberta Water Rights Act, because it's time to act right about water, which means we have to talk about storage. How are we storing water? How are we releasing water? If we look at the tailings ponds, what are the ways in which we are investing in chemical engineering to separate the minerals to release the water in a healthy way? What are the ways we are investing in innovation? One of the platform bases that I committed to as Premier is that we will build an Institute of Excellence specifically on water. We must become innovative on how we strategically implement the usage of water, particularly around irrigation in the South. We have 6 major corporations that are the largest consumers of water in this area. We are going to have to renegotiate the lease and allocation to ensure that every town, city, citizen, farm, ranch has the water they need to sustain Alberta's economy.
Thank you. Thank you. I will now open a 2-minute debate on question 1. Any candidate that wants to respond?
Well, I guess I'll start by jumping in and saying, any one of us on this stage would be better placed to do a better job than the UCP is doing right now. Some of my...
I agree.
Some of my colleagues have put forward amazing policy in this area, and I think it really demonstrates what we have to offer this province. I think what we can do better than the UCP is make it clear to people that they don't have to make a choice between feeding their kids and making progress on climate change.
And I think Albertans need to recognize that the crisis is coming with water. If we look at the snowpack, the rainfall, we have got to be smarter than just agreements of niceties. We have to think about the economies that are using water and negotiate with oil and gas, because water is used, whether it's to process in a SAGD process or whether it's used to grow potatoes or grow the corn for our cattle. We have to make sure we are allocating it properly, which all of us or any of us will do better than the UCP.
But some of us actually have policy on it. Some of us are actually telling you that climate is one of our key priorities and what we're going to actually do. So I encourage you all, anyone who's interested in learning more about my thought-out climate leadership plan, climate action plan, to visit sarahhoffman.ca. We have a number of really bold ideas there. And I think all of us agree that mining coal on the eastern slopes, that's a no-go. We need to protect our headwaters. We need to protect our watersheds. But some of us have gone a step further, had deeper conversations with folks in industry and with workers. And I'm excited to tell you that I'm not going to be afraid to run on climate change.
I think it's important for us to understand that reducing our emissions and making our contribution to dealing with climate change isn't just a climate or environmental priority, it's an economic priority for our province,
Yes.
one that our current provincial government is they're throwing a wet blanket over innovation in the renewable
Thank you.
sector, and that
Thank you
has
very
to stop.
much. Thank you, Gil. Thank you, candidates. If I could get a round of applause for question 1. Our next question here again is for all the candidates. Healthcare continues to be one of the biggest concerns for Albertans in urban, rural, and Indigenous communities. One of the draws to all these communities is knowing that there is good health services and access to a family doctor. How would you ensure that all Albertans have access to a family doctor? And this question, we will start with Jody.
Thank you. Oh, the healthcare system needs a lot of love and a lot of attention, and I want to thank all of the workers who are holding the system together with their hearts, their minds, their blood, sweat, tears, and duct tape. Thank you for what you do. It matters and it makes a difference. But in order to fix that system or any system we have that is broken in our province, we have to stabilize our economy. We have to grow our economy. It is going to cost money to hire the doctors that I'm going to recruit. It is going to cost money to hire the nurses. It is going to cost money to make contracts with the folks who clean the hospital, which is just as integral and important as the nurses and doctors. It's important that we make sure the rural don't have to drive 5 hours to see a doctor, that they can go in their neighborhood and have access to health care. That's fundamentally important. That's what Tommy Douglas fought for. That's what makes us New Democrats, is healthcare is a priority for Albertans.
Gil.
So our healthcare system isn't staggering towards a collapse. We are in the midst of a collapse right now. And the solutions are pretty straightforward, and they're certainly not being considered by the UCP right now. First of all, we have to understand that at the root of it, the healthcare crisis is a staffing crisis. We don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough allied health professionals, and that takes money to solve. So we have a system that's stretched. We have to put money on the table to hire people, and frankly, we have to put money on the table to increase wages. That's another crisis. 250,000 of our public sector workers are without contracts right now, and if we don't find money to give them wages that keep up with inflation, we're not going to be able to attract them, we're not going to be able to retain them, and the system will continue to fall apart.
Naheed.
We've been doing this for the last 5 or 6 weeks. We're starting to sound like one another. But I don't need to tell anyone in this part of Southern Alberta about the crisis in healthcare. When you have to drive by 2 closed emergency rooms on a holiday weekend to get to one that's open, we know that the system has, in fact, collapsed. And when you peel the onion on the Premier and you ask her, what's the problem, what's the problem, what's the problem, she'll finally get to, well, AHS spends too much money on management. Never mind that all the studies show they spend less than anyone else. But I'm not that good at math, I guess. How do you build 4 systems with their own management and that's going to cost you less than 1? But here's the issue. Yes, we need money, but yes, we have to respect the frontline workers and understand that when we take government, inshallah, in 2027, they will have been through a wrenching organizational change. We won't be able to do it again. So we have to start with respect, and we have to start with adequate funding, understanding this is a priority for all of us, even before the economy grows more.
Kathleen.
So this issue is critical to us. There are women right here in Lethbridge who have had to get on the highway and drive 2 hours while in labor. That is the world that the UCP are building, and we absolutely need to do better. My plan involves focusing on 3 things to fix healthcare. The first is family medicine. It involves changing the contracts so that the compensation is different and we attract more people. It also involves having our family doctors work in teams, with the goal being to get everyone a family doctor and to make sure that they have access within 3 days. The other focus is on long-term care. Right now, we have a government that has removed all of the standards for care from long-term care. That is a huge problem. What I would do is make sure that we're investing in long-term care, but also that we are making sure that those workers have proper wages and full-time employment so that our seniors get the care that they deserve.
Sarah.
Thank you. I was Alberta's first NDP health minister. And when you think back on that time, it was kind of boring. And my commitment to you is to make public health care boring again. That is a bold commitment, I know. But we didn't have scandals. Every major municipality in Alberta, you could get a family doctor. The good news is I was at the table and I struck those deals with doctors. And when we negotiated, because we had such a good relationship built on trust, they actually returned their retention bonuses so that we could invest it back in the system and do it together. So if you want to get healthcare back on track, I'd say make the person who had the best relationship with healthcare workers the next premier. Let's show Albertans exactly how good healthcare can be, because you're right, Milk River's emergency department's closed as often as it's open. We also need to expand med schools, including to here in Lethbridge, and I absolutely have a plan with the University of Calgary to be able to do that. So I'm so excited, let me do it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone. I will now open for a 2-minute debate on question 2.
You know, this is obviously the issue that is touching Albertans the most. If it's not family doctors, it's emergency rooms. And I will say, I encourage you to read all of the policies of the candidates here. There are some very thoughtful things in there. I want to hear what Kathleen's third one is. You know, home care is a big issue. That's one that I'm very close to. But we really have to also understand that the work that the UCP is doing now is papering over the problems. So today's announcement, for example, on nurse practitioners sounds good at the front, but is actually, because they don't have the relationships, doing it in a way that is alienating the family doctors. So money, as Gil says, is absolutely critical, but it's also critical to treat these people with respect, from the racialized women who work at the front lines that Jody pointed out, to the doctors, to the nurses, to the administrators, to everyone who has a stake in healthcare. We got to start with respect.
And what's really important is that people are patient. We're going to need to work together to rebuild, to repair this broken structure. We're all going to have to work together because it has been split and it is being privatized, which means it's going to take time, energy, and investment by all of us to repair this.
It is actually home care. That's the third part
I
of
thought
that.
it was. I was giving you a little.
So the basic plan would be to decongest acute care right now, because right now we can't even see what the problems are. So when you decongest it at the front end by making sure that everyone has an access to a family doctor so they don't wind up in the emergency room, make sure that everyone has access to mental health care, and then at the back end by making sure that we have long-term care and we have home care to support people leaving the hospital, we absolutely can improve the system.
And I've been working with Dr. John Meddings, who is the former chair at the University of Alberta and the dean at the University of Calgary Faculties of Medicine. And doctors and other healthcare workers are keen to work with us on solutions. I've established those relationships over 9 years. I know that they will come to the table if I invite them back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can clap. That concludes our debate on question 2. And our next question again is for all candidates. In our province, many Indigenous communities are affected by resource development projects. What is your stance on balancing economic development and the concerns of Indigenous communities? How would you involve Indigenous communities in decision-making processes? And we are beginning with Naheed.
Thanks for that question. You know, the answer is, I think, actually quite straightforward. Don't talk about us without us. To ensure that we're engaging everyone in community in these conversations. It's absolutely true that resource development can bring prosperity and wealth to Indigenous communities, but it's not always true. And we need to ensure that the folks in the communities have the opportunity to decide their own futures. You know, I've been very fortunate over the last 12 or 14 years to build deep ties with the Indigenous communities in the Treaty 7 areas here in southern Alberta, talking a lot about economic development and about how we use the assets in those communities, which are largely land and brilliant people, to be able to bring prosperity. The greatest sin of Canada is that we have not included Indigenous people in the prosperity of this nation. And again, it starts with respect, but it really starts with understanding that people in communities need to be empowered to make the right decisions for their future.
Thank you. Gil?
Indigenous peoples are second-class citizens on their land. And when the Notley government was in power, I had the privilege of being appointed to be the co-chair of something called the Energy Diversification Advisory Committee. It's a committee that was given the task of coming up with recommendations about how to develop our resources and pivot towards diversification. And I'm very proud to say that we had Indigenous representation on that committee, and we made a priority of reaching out to Indigenous communities to talk about development on their land. And some of the recommendations that we put forward led to policies that are still actually being followed now in terms of consultation. So we've made a start of it. We know that, as Nahed said, nothing about us without us. That was sort of our operating principle. We've done it before, we can do it again, but we need to do it better.
Thank you. Jody?
When I'm Premier, the first policy I'll implement is the Alberta Dividend Royalties Act, which in there is a pillar around the NRTA, which means we need to share the resources with the First Nations. There are 48 First Nations, 8 Métis settlements, the Métis Nations of Alberta, and it's important that the resources that are extracted, that the royalties also, the dividends also be shared with those nations, because on the nations, what the issue is poverty. Poverty is the crippler. Second to that is education, which is also important to invest in, which is why the Royalties Dividend Act is incredibly important, not just for First Nations, but for all Albertans. We own the resources in this province. We have to act like owners, claim our royalties, and spend them wisely to ensure future generations, on a First Nations or not, have a successful future, clean water and clean air to breathe.
Thank you. Sarah?
So one of the things I've been doing in the past as a deputy leader is a lot of work around candidate search and recruitment. And one of the things I'm proudest of is that I was one of the people asked Jody to run. It was so important to me that we make sure that Indigenous candidates run in seats that we were likely to win. And Jody and Brooks are doing a phenomenal job. Having them at the table guiding this work is the only way that we will be able to move forward. And we need more than just Jody and Brooks. We need to make sure that other candidates right across this province see themselves in our party and that they are keen to run for and with us. So I'm really proud that Catherine Swampy is one of the co-chairs for my campaign. She is a strong, intelligent woman who's run both for the federal and provincial NDP, but she's also been a counselor as well. So I think building more of those relationships and making sure that we invite more people to be at the leadership tables, and we need more First Nations, Métis, and Inuit staff as well to make sure that they're helping us lead this work.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Like many of you here, I live in Alberta because my dad worked in oil and gas. So I understand how important it is and how central it is to our economy. But that historic deal that created so much wealth for this province is eroding. More and more, the economy we have is about giving more to those who are wealthier and not sharing that wealth. The poverty that is seen on First Nations as a result of this unfairness in treatment is devastating, and it's not fair to people, and we absolutely must do better. That's one of the reasons, one of my concrete policies is to review the AER and to rewrite it to make sure that it is working in the public interest. The purpose of a regulator isn't just the economy. It's protecting the public, protecting our air, land, and water, and protecting the people to make sure they get what they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. I will now open question 3 to 2 minutes of debate.
I want to pick up on the point about the Alberta Energy Regulator. The Alberta Energy Regulator is supposed to be a watchdog for Albertans to look after the public interest, but instead of a watchdog, it's become a lapdog. And instead of simply reviewing it, I think that we have to go further. One of the first things that I would do as Premier would be to fire the CEO, fire the entire board, and replace it with a board that's actually representative of the citizens they're supposed to represent.
We have record profits in this province, and we have record pollution and contamination on Indigenous lands. The water is contaminated with polycyclic hydrocarbons, arsenic, methylmercury, cadmium, which are carcinogens that cause cancer. We look at Fort Chipewyan in the 1980s, 2000. They discovered that cancer was at a higher rate of 30% downstream from the Alberta oil sands because we were not doing our job with the Alberta Energy Regulator. And my colleagues are right, that absolutely must be addressed.
And there needs to be Indigenous representation on that board, which is not the case right now. Every single one of that AER board, they're retired industry hacks, and that we need to have a representative board that includes Indigenous representation.
I absolutely agree. The purpose of a regulator is to protect the public, and what we have right now isn't that. With the Curl Lake situation, where there were chemicals leaching onto a First Nation, it wasn't the regulator that notified, it was the company. That is an incredible problem. The company has a duty, or the regulator has a duty to the public, and they ought to be fulfilling it.
You know, just to bring it back to Indigenous communities, I don't want to lose Jody's point about how the root cause here is poverty. But let's not also forget that there are serious concerns coming from poverty around mental health, addiction, housing, and we need a much better strategy. We can't just push the ball around and say, oh, it's the federal government's responsibility. The province must take leadership to ensure all Indigenous people are partners in the prosperity of this place.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now it is time to debate between 3 candidates at a time. Each candidate will have an initial response of 1 minute. You'll have an initial response for 1 minute, followed by 90 seconds of open debate between those 3 candidates. After each candidate debates, the other 2 candidates do have an opportunity to get the last word in by requesting a 1-minute rebuttal. So the first group of 3 is Sarah, Kathleen, and Naheed. Last year, the UCP government implemented a 6-month moratorium on renewable energy projects. In February, they announced new policies on solar and wind energy. What will you do to encourage development while taking into account concerns about renewable energy projects? And we'll start with Sarah.
Yeah, so I've already made the commitment that day one, Sarah Hoffman Premier will absolutely repeal the ban on large-scale solar and wind projects. It is an economy killer. It's an environmental disaster. It's important that we unleash the talent of industry. And before they brought in this moratorium, which turned into a ban, we were leading in the country. Not because we were doing anything to incent it, because we had the right conditions here. We had the right conditions because some work was done when we were already an NDP government years earlier. So we need to get out of the way of industry and let them get back to the table and let them get back to building clean renewable energy projects for us right across this province. And we know that there are lots of economic opportunities, and that's why, again, my plan for the climate really leans heavily on making sure that we're expanding wind and solar while also fire smarting and water smarting our municipalities.
Kathleen.
This is exactly the narrative that the UCP are trying to push, that we have to pick renewables or oil and gas, that we can't have a yes-and conversation about energy. And it's exactly that that leaves people questioning the leadership of the NDP. It's not true, but the UCP have done a really good job of pushing this narrative that if we talk about renewables, that if we talk about climate change, that we are going to destroy their jobs. And as long as people are having to make that choice between food on the table and taking action on climate change, they're not going to make the choice that we want them to. That is why we have to communicate to folks that it's a yes-and conversation. This ban was incredibly destructive. It pushed so much investment out of this province, investment that was here because of the good work that we did in government, proving the case for renewables, and we could absolutely do that again.
Naheed.
I'm nerdy about many things. But one of the things that I'm particularly nerdy about is electricity and the electricity grid. When I started my last job, I suddenly realized that I owned an electrical utility and I better get smart real fast. The Premier has not availed herself of the opportunity to get smart real fast on this stuff. So every time I hear her talk about electricity, it's like nails on a chalkboard because she doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't understand baseload and peaking and all those fun things. So that renewables ban chased away anywhere between $30 and $300 billion of investment from Alberta by taking away business certainty and all of the jobs that go with it. So not only is the right thing to do environmentally to ensure that we're investing in renewables, it's also the right thing to do economically as we're modernizing our electricity grid. The UCP has looked over a quadrupling of our electricity rates and energy alerts even when it's not cold. We need smarter people doing smarter things throughout the electricity system.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I will have Sarah, Kathleen, and Naheed. You have 90 seconds for an open debate.
And this is so typical of the UCP. It is so typical. This is a government that is fundamentally incompetent, and that's why we absolutely must win the next election. They're mismanaging our electricity grid, they're mismanaging our healthcare, they're mismanaging our economy. And that is why we need to step forward unapologetically and tell people why our ideas on the economy, why making energy a yes and conversation, why giving more to those who have less is the better solution.
So while we've heard many sentences ahead, I just want to be very clear. Are you going to, on day one, if you have the honor of leading this province, repeal the ban that's in place right now? Because
we're going to debate
hearing
now.
many sentences,
Yeah,
but we're not hearing a lot of policy.
Yeah, so let me suggest to you, Sarah, that I've heard you say it many times. You know there is no ban at the moment. There is a set of policies that are wrong. And yes, we will repeal those policies and put new things in, but and I've talked to many people in the renewables industry about exactly the regulatory environment that they require. But we should be honest with people and say that the ban, which was a moratorium, isn't there anymore. It's just been replaced by terrible policy.
Except I've seen the bingo dabber maps. You know that the vast majority of the places where there's wind in Alberta, you're not allowed to build wind projects. Even if the local landowner wants to put wind on their own private property, they're not allowed to. It is banned in those areas with the policies.
It is 100% taking away people's right to their own prosperity. Sorry, Kathleen.
Oh, I was just going to say, well, functionally it might not be a ban. Practically, in some ways it
Fair enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
So will you repeal it?
Thank you. Well, we will move on here. Thank you. I would like to give an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal to either Jody or Gil, or if you both want to.
Yes, thank
wants
you.
to go for Jody.
We need to double down on renewables. We are energy leaders, and we need to diversify our economic systems and stabilize them and invite those innovators back to our province so we can thrive and repair those broken systems of healthcare and education and so on, which means we're going to have geothermal, not just for heating houses, but geothermal power. Norway gets 72% of their total power from geothermal steam power. We are already experts in drilling. It makes sense. We're going to do natural gas. We're going to do oil and gas. We're going to do wind. We're going to do solar. And it's about building out and up so that we have a prosperous province, so that we do thrive together and we have jobs for citizens. And we are doing it by capturing carbon all at the same time.
Thank you, Gil.
With due respect to my colleagues, I don't think it's a question of Danielle Smith being incompetent or not knowing what she's doing. I actually think she knows exactly what she's doing by imposing restrictions on renewables. Her job should be to defend the interests of the citizens of this province, but what she's doing is defending the interests of incumbents in the industry at the expense of Albertans.
Yes.
So we have to get that right.
Yes.
So what I've said from the beginning of this campaign is that in order to win, we have to build an economic case. And the future of renewables, especially in rural Alberta, is key to strengthening our economy, but also winning the next election.
Yes.
Because a healthy and growing renewable sector creates jobs where? In rural Alberta. It creates revenues. Where? In rural Alberta. This is a case of a policy that we can support that will grow our economy and help us win the next election.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next group of three is Naheed, Gil, and Jody. After the leadership debates were announced, members were asked to send in their questions, and this is one of the questions that was sent to our office. With wide open spaces, blue skies, and endless beauty, rural Alberta is an amazing place to live. As populations in small towns decline and communities struggle in their halls, schools, and fire departments, what will you do to ensure communities remain vibrant? And we'll begin with Naheed.
Thanks so much. You know, if I have a criticism of the Alberta New Democrats from 2015 till now, I would say that we haven't been present enough in the communities outside of Calgary and Edmonton. And I hesitate to use the term rural Alberta because there are communities of all different sizes. I'm not sure that a nurse who lives in central Lethbridge thinks of herself as rural, or an oil field worker in Fort McMurray. So what we have to do is start by being present in the communities, by building up our infrastructure, by listening to people as to what their concerns are. You know, progressive people, we have a terrible habit of assuming that we know better than the people we're talking to. What's the Trouble with Kansas is a famous book, which assumes that the people who are voting in Kansas are voting against their own self-interests. It's not right. We have to listen to people's concerns before we start explaining to them that the Conservatives today are not the Conservatives of the past, that they haven't done anything for them lately, and that we have to attract more people to these amazing communities that exist across the province.
Gil.
This question is personal for me because in addition to being a worker advocate and a union leader, I'm also a farm kid. And when I see us performing so poorly outside of the big cities, it's like a double gut punch for me. And the solutions are both political and economic. On the political side, we have to get more comfortable outside the big cities. That might mean hiring people from outside the big cities to work for us. We need to show up. We need to put our money where our mouth is, run 87-seat strategy in every riding of this province. We need to empower our local constituency associations and implement the recommendations of our own working group. On the economy, we have to have solutions, and I'm running out of time, but the renewables, oil and gas cleanup is probably the biggest opportunity for re-employing people in rural Alberta who have been losing their jobs in oil field service. It's
Thank you.
Opportunity for
Thank
us
you very
to
much.
do big things in rural Alberta. Thanks.
Thank you. Jody?
Sorry.
It's critical that we invest in small businesses. Growing up in Onaway with my grandparents owning the hardware store, I learned just how vital it is to have small businesses in the small towns. As government, we have to ensure that our relationship with municipal governments are respectful and that we're listening to what they need and we're investing in them. And we're ensuring that young people have opportunities on their farms, in their towns, in their small cities. We have to make sure that it's a viable future, that they see themselves as successful in these small towns, which means we're going to have to reframe the agreements that we have now because they are not working. We're going to have to reinstate the investment that has been cut by the UCP government because it is essential that our small towns thrive in our province because that's what makes us Alberta. It's not just the big cities, it's our farms, it's our ranches, and it's our beautiful small towns.
Thank you. I will now open an open debate between Naheed, Gil, and Jody.
You know,
90 seconds, sorry.
One of the things that's shocked me the most in the conversations I've had with people across Alberta is when people tell me, look, the school in my town is half the size that it used to be, but we still have 45 students in a class because we can't attract and retain teachers. And so for me, one of the critical things that we have to think about, and I agree with you, Gil, on everything, there's a lot of stuff on how do we win in rural Alberta, which we have to do. But I think we also have to look at the quality of life in every community in Alberta and ensure that every community has the public services that they need in order to attract the people who want to live and work there.
And public services aren't just about attracting people and retaining them in rural communities. I agree with you, it's critical. But in smaller communities, public sector jobs are often the best jobs in the community. So when we talk about stopping privatization, this is not just a notional issue. It really hits home even more so in rural communities because when you privatize, when you contract out the work, you turn good jobs into bad jobs, and that doesn't have an effect just on the workers.
When we were in government, we put in Bill 6, which really damaged the relationship with the rural. And we have to repair the relationship, which means showing up, listening, working with our candidates who run out there in our constituency associations, working with the volunteers who come from that area and listening, because we are going to strengthen our party by connecting with the people who believe in New Democrat values.
Thank you. Thank you. I will now give an opportunity for Sarah or Kathleen. 1 minute.
Yeah, so I would just like to say that we actually do have a lot of people working in communities outside of Edmonton and Calgary. We have people working incredibly hard in mid-sized cities and rural areas throughout the province. We have candidates, we have thousands of volunteers knocking on a lot of doors. I think what we need to give them in order to make progress is a real offer on the economy. I think we need to give them concrete policies. One of those concrete policies that I am proposing is about ensuring that we have bus service to rural areas. My grandmother, my father grew up in Shaunavon, Saskatchewan. My grandmother wasn't able to drive at the end. So her only way out of that community to her family was on a bus. And I think if we want to keep our communities vibrant, we need to consider investing in things like rural bus service.
Sarah?
I just want to correct the record on something. The reason why we have 45 kids in a classroom is because we have the lowest per capita education funding of anywhere in the country. And we need an NDP leader who's going to call the government out on that, not blame the fact that we can't attract people, because we can attract them if we actually properly fund education. So that's one thing I want to correct the record on. The other piece I want to say is that I grew up in Canuso, a village of 200 in northern Alberta, and those values of my friends and neighbors up there are NDP values. And after we lost in 2019 and we licked our wounds for a few months, I said, I want a buddy riding that's not in Edmonton or Calgary. And Rachel told me, you get Banff Kananaskis. And I got on the phone. I did the grunt work. I helped call the volunteers and say, thank you for volunteering last time. Will you please volunteer next time? We made sure that there was a strong EDA. There were 4 candidates who contested the nomination there. We got the fantastic Sarah El-Maliki as a candidate. She worked her ass off with me. I knocked in those rural ridings with her, and we won Banff Kananaskis.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Our next group of 3 is Sarah, Gil, and Jody. So candidates, here is your next question. Agriculture is one of the top 3 economic drivers in Alberta next to forestry and oil and gas. Here in Lethbridge, agriculture generates more than $1 billion in revenue from everything from feedlots, oilseed, potato, and sugar beet processing. How do you ensure agriculture remains one of Alberta's key industries? Sarah.
So I did talk about water licenses and how we need to recalibrate those so that it isn't just who's ever at the front of the line or who has the deepest pockets. So number 1 is human use. Number 2 for me is crops. That is, I think, the crux of your question. How do we make sure that we have the resources and that the inputs that we need for a strong agricultural industry? My grandparents homesteaded. They had a mixed farm with 2 quarter sections. You could make a go of it and raise 2 kids who both got to move off to the city and get good post-secondary educational opportunities at that scale at that time. But it is really tough for anyone to have a small farm like that nowadays and be able to put enough food on their own table, let alone support their children and grandchildren. So we need to make sure that we are working with the experts to make sure that we recalibrate some of the issues that are in place right now around people not being able to afford to get into the industry. And we need to make sure that those who are in the industry have access to water. And of course, that we support the crop insurance programs that are publicly funded right now.
Gil.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up where Sarah left off. And as I mentioned, I'm a farm kid. I grew up on a small farm north of Westlock. And one of the things that I've seen in my lifetime is what I would describe as the corporatization of agriculture. When I was growing up in our neighborhood, there were 8 families in a 10-mile radius, and we all farmed. Right now, there's only 1 left. And big corporate farmer. And if we as New Democrats want to be of help to our brothers and sisters in rural Alberta, and if we want to defend the industry, we have to find a way for young people who are interested to get into farming to actually do that without having a $1 million nest egg from their family. Yeah. That's a really big issue for me. And then I'm running out of time again, but water. It's a big limiting factor, especially here in southern Alberta, and
Thank
it needs
you,
to be
Gil.
addressed.
Jody.
Thank you. We are going to have to do multiple things at once because according to scientists, we have the driest soil we've ever had recorded in 105 years. We had the hottest March ever recorded in history. from experts, scientists have said that they have given this region 10 to 15 years of soil, which means we're going to have to invest in innovative solutions around water. How are we going to grow food for our crops? Are we going to renegotiate with farmers what they grow, whether it's be potatoes, sugar beets, or grain, because grain uses less water than sugar beets? How are we going to implement aquaponics and hydroponics so that we are growing food differently? We have to be innovative, and we have to invest now so that our children and grandchildren have access to crops so that we can feed the cattle, because we sell 65% of Canada's beef out of Alberta. We have to make sure that those cows have food, which means we have to be strategic with our farmers and innovate, innovate, innovate.
Thank you. And now we have Sarah Gill and Jody, 90-second debate, open debate.
I've spent a lot of time in rural Alberta over the last 9 years as an MLA. That very first summer, if you want to go back and look at Facebook, I visited small rural hospitals all throughout the province because I wanted them to know that whether or not they had an NDP MLA, they had somebody who cared about their healthcare system and was going to support the sustainability of it. I made sure that when I launched my campaign for leader, I got in my car about 20 minutes after I finished my speech and I hit the highway. And I've hit towns like Villeneuve, I've hit Stettler, I've been in Fairview and Valley View and Grimshaw. I have been going to the places where people have been building this party for decades. And I've been wanting to do that work with you in my past capacity, and now we can do that work together with me as your leader.
Farmers and ranchers want to be assured they're going to have the water they need to grow their crops and to take care of their herds of cattle and horses. It is essential that we do water licensing agreements differently. It is critical that we invest in the Lethbridge Institute of Excellence, that we are encouraging young people to think differently about how we grow food. We must do this, and we have to do it now.
We only have 3 major watersheds in Alberta. We've got the Athabasca that is basically used up by the oil sands. We have the North Saskatchewan, and then we have the South Saskatchewan, including the Oldman River. We have to start looking at the watersheds in a different way. It doesn't. The water doesn't just provide sustenance for our agricultural sector, but also for our industry.
Thank you very much, Gil. We now have Kathleen and Nahid, 1 minute rebuttal.
Yeah, so I think most of what's been said here tonight, I would agree with. Ultimately, this is an economic diversification issue, and much like when we're dealing with our oil and gas sector, investment in upgrading is very, very important. Certainly everything that's been mentioned so far tonight is important too, but we did that when we were in government, right? That was one of the steps that we took. Shannon Phillips, who is your MLA for at least probably half of you in this room tonight, worked incredibly hard when we were in government to ensure that we got that deal done with Cavendish to make sure that that processing plant was able to come here, because we can get much better value for our agricultural product if we upgrade it here rather than sending it somewhere else to have it processed and then buying it back for more.
Good point.
Thank you. Nahid?
Thank you. I'm so glad you mentioned Shannon Phillips, because that reminds me of something I should have said in the last round, which is there is one place in Alberta outside of Calgary and Edmonton where we win. And what we need to do is learn from Lethbridge and ensure that we take those lessons across the rest of the province. I also just want to say one other thing about this whole issue, and that is this question of trust. Jody mentioned it earlier. What the NDP government did in 2016-17 around Bill 6 broke the trust with a lot of agricultural communities. We've got to figure out a way to rebuild that trust so that people know that we're there to help them become more productive. And we have to get people to trust us overall on the economy. So yes, for example, obviously we need to fund education and healthcare better, but we also have to hear rural people who tell us there is a funded position I cannot fill for a family doctor, for an emergency room nurse, for a teacher. That's how we build credibility, by not just saying we're going to throw money at it, but that we actually hear you and help you solve your problem.
Thank you. I just want to give our candidates an opportunity to take a drink of water, take a breath. And if you guys want to make some noise right now, you can. Aren't they all doing a fabulous job?
Thank you.
And I don't think I need to tell anybody that they did not know the questions. So they're doing a great job. We have 2 more questions, and then we will be finishing this evening. And thank you, everyone, for your patience, and thank you for being so respectful tonight. So our next group, for our second last question, is Kathleen, Naheed, and Gil. And so candidates, here's your next question. In just a few months, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion from Alberta to British Columbia will be complete, and bitumen will flow through the pipeline. When NDP Premier Rachel Notley announced the approval of this pipeline, one of the goals was to have access to the world markets and to world prices for Alberta energy. As Premier, how will you ensure that Albertans get the best value for the resources they own? Kathleen?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we have to do is to begin by actually being willing to work with the federal government. And that is not what is happening right now with the UCP. A lot of these projects require exactly that. When we were in government, we did an incredibly good job getting that pipeline built. We did strategic polling and advertising into other jurisdictions. We took support from 40% to 70%, and that is how we convinced the federal government, by making the case to the people of Canada that this was a better choice than to put that oil on rail. And the result has been billions of dollars into the Alberta coffers that have funded schools and hospitals and paid for the incredibly important things. This is fundamental. Talking about how we can grow the economy while we are simultaneously taking action on climate change, which we did, is what will win the election.
Thank you, Naheed.
A lot of folks don't know about all that work that Kathleen just mentioned, which is so important on getting TMX built. I had a lot to do with that too. I don't want to take credit, but there was a ton of work that had to be done, even though that pipeline doesn't go through Calgary. And the reason that that was so important was precisely in the question, which is it helps us get proper value for our resources, because what we were doing is we were selling a finite resource at below market price with all of its attendant environmental concerns. Ask me how much it bugs me that A, it went 9 times over budget, which is what I was expecting, or B, that the Premier is going to take credit for something she didn't do when the when the oil starts flowing. Let's remind everyone who says we're no good on the economy that Conservative governments provincially and federally got a grand total of 0 miles of pipeline built to Tidewater. It was Rachel Notley and the federal government, and a little bit the Mayor of Calgary, who actually got the job done.
Thank you. Gil?
There are 3 words. There are 3 words that make many Albertans nervous: global energy transition. But these words are incredibly important when we're talking about the value of our resources, because those words are not an environmentalist slogan. They are a description of what's actually happening in global oil markets. We're reaching a point where demand for oil will peak and start to decline, and when it does, price will as well. And as the owners of our resources here in Alberta, we have an obligation to make sure that we find ways to make sure our resources still have value. And that's why I, as president of the Alberta Federation of Labour, working with our unions in oil and gas, we put together a proposal to pivot from focusing on fuels to focusing on materials like petrochemicals and carbon fiber. That's the future. And even as demand goes down, we can find a way to get value for our resources by pivoting to the future.
Thank you very much. So Kathleen, Naheed, and Gil, you have 90-second open debate.
And Gil, I would really like to thank you for the incredible work that you did on that and for the incredible concrete policies that you are putting forward. I think that at the end of the day, that is how we win the hearts and minds of Albertans. We put forward concrete ideas that they can latch onto, that build a narrative, that talk about, how and why we will be better on the economy. I think it is very important that in this leadership race, everybody know where each and every one of us stand in incredibly concrete terms.
Well, you're talking about me, so I'll jump in. Because the other thing we have to remember, though, is we have to avoid the sin of arrogance. Because it's not throwing ideas out there and hoping Albertans latch on to them. It's co-creating. the future that we want with Albertans, and in particular, creating that with the party. And speaking as an outsider who's coming in, it is absolutely critical that caucus and the members of this party, now many, many times the number of members we had in January, are actually part of that conversation.
Right,
So
but
we
now
gotta know
had
where we
fair-
stand, but everyone
fair to
knows
Ed.
where I stand.
To be fair, to
Naheed,
Ed,
I think
someone who
people need-
aspires to lead a party should be able to tell people where he's going to lead it.
So
You don't have
what
to-
question do you have, Gil?
But you don't have
Where
to-
do you think I don't stand?
but-
Where my stance is not clear?
The question I have for you, Naheed, is if I become leader of Alberta's NDP, I will ask you to run in a seat.
Well,
will
thank
you do
you.
it?
Thank
Are
you.
you sure?
Thank you.
100%.
Can I answer her question?
I'll give you a few seconds.
Yeah, you know, ultimately, it will depend on the new leader, whoever she or he is. My job is to help you defeat this government
Thank you,
whatever way I
Naheed.
can.
Thank you. I would like to give a rebut to Sarah, and 1 minute, Jody, 1 minute.
Sure. So to get back to the question, one of the things that helped move that dial of federal support is the fact that we are part of a federal party, and Rachel went to convention and she made a business case for New Democrats across the country to get on side with us doing that expansion. She talked about moving from manifesto to governing and to be able to use the resource revenue that we have from that industry to be able to fund education and healthcare. And she got standing applause from New Democrats from across the country. So we can't be, I know a lot of people like to put up walls and blame Danielle Smith for putting up walls, but there's somebody on this stage who wants to put up a wall with the federal party, maybe two people who want to put up walls with the federal party. That's dangerous. I think that people don't vote for a constitution, they vote for bold policies, NDP policies in this province, and that's what's going to get us over the hurdle, and that's what's going to make sure that we can have a strong economy. If we want a better federal party, we need more federal New Democrats hanging out in Ottawa, federal New Democrats from the prairie provinces, from Lethbridge.
Thank you. Jody?
Insofar as the pipeline, there are two things we need to do. One, we must renegotiate our royalty agreements. Oil and gas has not decreased. In fact, it has continued to increase over the past 4 decades, which means the revenue has also, we've seen record profits, which means we need to have record investment back into Albertans' pockets. The second thing we need to do is we need to hold industry accountable. When there are leaks, the omnibus bill that got put through by the federal government, what it did is it removed protection of the waters. We need to reinstate protection of the waters. And so things like pigging and the oil sands, when that goes through the pipeline, we want to make sure the AER is regulating so that when there is a leak, communities, cities, towns are immediately notified and a cleanup crew is ready to move out to clean up the water to ensure that there is no more contamination. 2 things, royalties and clean it up.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next group of 3 will be Sarah, Kathleen, and Jody. So imagine that today is June 23rd, and you have been selected as the new leader of the NDP. Now that you have everyone united behind your leadership, how are you going to take on Danielle Smith and appeal to voters in Lethbridge and across the province? Sarah?
Sure. This is something that I've been working on for decades with folks right in this room. The best way for us to build our party is to have human connections. I'm not going to have gatekeepers. Many of you already have my phone number. Please call me. Let's get back to work. I'm going to make sure I reach out to everybody who's been on this stage and make the same offer Kathleen just did. There's room for everybody on this stage in a Sarah Hoffman government. Everyone on the stage. And the way we win is by using our talents to move us forward. But I want to lead this party. And I've been doing the work behind the scenes of raising money. I've been at fundraisers with you at the Owl, gone door knocking on hundreds of thousands of doors for the NDP as a New Democrat all across this province. And I've been recruiting candidates, and I want to make sure that we retain quality candidates as well. We talk about retaining in healthcare and in education. We also need to retain the amazing talent that we have in the NDP, and I think that I'm in the best position to be able to do that as somebody who attracted a lot of those people in the first place.
Kathleen?
Wow, this is the dream scenario, isn't it? How would I build an NDP that can govern this province? First, I think that everyone on this stage has something to contribute. They all have something amazing to bring to that team. Second, I think the answer is hard work, and we've been doing that hard work across the province. We've been knocking on thousands of doors. That is how we win where it is difficult. That is how we win in places like right here in Lethbridge, is by doing that work. But when we get to those doors, I think people need a little bit more of a concrete offer to give. I think they need to have something to say about the economy, because in the last election, everyone whose top issue was education or healthcare, they voted with us. But for a lot of people whose top issue was how do I pay my mortgage, they didn't quite trust us. And that's sad, because we have a much better story to tell about that than the UCP does.
Thank you. Jody?
It's about doing what our predecessor did. Grant drove around in his Oldsmobile from town to town. He sat in farmhouse at kitchen table. He went to community meetings, and he listened to the citizens of Alberta. And that's exactly what we have to do. We have an extraordinary team of MLAs who have a rigorous background from doctors and lawyers and social workers and teachers, and they're brilliant, they're compassionate, they're kind, and their team of volunteers, we're gonna go door knocking, and we are gonna listen to how we build a government that works for Albertans together. We build it together, and it's about the stories we tell each other. It's about Wahkohtowin. It's about our relationship to each other and how we flourish as Albertans together. So it's about doing what our predecessor did, drive around in a car and listen to stories.
Thank you. Sarah, Kathleen, and Jody, a 90-second open debate.
In terms of paying that mortgage, that's why housing is my third pillar of my platform. We need to make sure that we actually bring in temporary rent control, just like we did previously under Conservative governments. We've had them before. We need to make sure that while we have that temporary rent control, we actually build affordable, social, nonprofit, and supportive permanent housing. It's not okay with me that there's people living on the streets in Lethbridge. It's not okay with me that there's kids in this room who can't imagine saving up enough money for first and last month's rent. We need to make sure that we're investing and that we're leading as New Democrats on one of the biggest financial pressures, which is housing.
I totally agree with you, Sarah. We absolutely need to make progress on this file. One of the saddest things I think about our world today is that most young people don't think they will ever own a home. But our policies are better. That's why we have to get out there. That's why we have to talk to people about the economy. And one of the other things I would add is that I will keep doing the things that I have been doing. I have endorsements from people who were rural candidates, rural ministers, right across
The
this province.
importance of sitting with Albertans and hearing their stories is that they get to see their values, our New Democrat values, that the things I believe are what they believe, that they want to have clean drinking water and food in their fridge and schools for their kids to go to, that New Democrat values are Alberta's values. And by sharing that story and that message is how we win this province and how we beat Danielle Smith in the UCP in 2027.
Woo.
Thank you. Thank you. I will give Naheed and Gil 1 minute each.
Obviously, we need to do the hard work. Obviously, we need to give people something to be inspired by. But I want to play a little bit of inside baseball here. We also need an organization that is built to win. We need to support our candidates in every one of the 87 ridings. We need to ensure that we're training people from now on organization and on activism and on helping them win. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you just take a map of Calgary and show where I won 3 times versus where the NDP lost, you'd have an NDP majority government. But it's not that easy. We have to re-win every single vote, and we have to make sure that we're reaching out to people in every part of the province. And we need people who haven't voted for us before to vote for us, which means we need people who vote for every party federally to vote for us. We need to ensure that people who have never voted for the NDP provincially will vote for us. We need to invite everyone in to understand that the values of today's NDP are indeed their values, but we have to have the conversation.
Thank you. Gil?
In order to win in 2027, we have to understand why we lost in 2019 and 2023, and we lost among working people. This is a gut punch for me as a worker advocate. The party that was built for workers is losing workers, and we can't hope to win in 2027 or any time after that unless we find a way to lure working people back to Alberta's working party. That means we have to be something more than the party of education, healthcare, and human rights. That's who we are. Those are our values. But the issues that these voters are concerned about are kitchen table economic issues. So we also have to become the party of wage growth. And yes, governments can pass policies to grow wages. We have to become the party of affordability, and we have to become a party with a plan to pivot our economy to the future. Only we are prepared to prepare our province for change instead of looking backward. That's our opportunity.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the question part and the end of our questions. And I just want to ask everybody to please give a round of applause for all of the candidates answering these questions. Very good job, very good job, very respectful. Thank you very much for the open debate. So we will now move to the 90-second closing statement from each candidate. And I want to begin with Jody.
Thank you so much for your time today and for all the love and support, for getting me here on the stage. I don't take for granted all of the work that it's taken to get me here. It's not just me, but all of my volunteers. I'm thankful. And why it's important that I'm here is because I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to beat Danielle Smith in the UCP. Two, I'm going to clean up the mess. But that means we have to work together and we have to be patient. There are so many fractured and broken systems because of the poor governance, which means we are all going to have to work together as Albertans. We're going to have to work together in the judicial system, in the healthcare system, in the education system, because we believe in a prosperous, beautiful Alberta for future generations. It's not about us. It's about our grandchildren. We need to make sure that there is food for their bellies and that there is water for crops and water to drink, which is why it's essential that we manage our water and be innovative and invest in innovation and invest in renewables and reduce our carbon and do the work that the rest of the world is doing. There is no reason for us not to be competitive in the global market. We are Albertans. We are New Democrats. We have fundamental beliefs in taking care of one another. No one gets left behind, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Sarah?
Since I didn't have a chance to rebut something that was just said, I'm going to do it in my closing. 34% more Calgarians voted NDP in the last election than ever voted for Mr. Nenshi for mayor. It's a fact. People are more used to voting NDP in Calgary. It's honest. This is the truth.
Not true.
I'm going to stand
fact,
up.
go on.
I'm going to stand up for the volunteers who are in this room, and I'm going to say that it's the volunteers of this province who make this party amazing. They have gone to bat for us each and every time right here in Lethbridge. They've proven 3 elections in a row that Lethbridge is an NDP city. I hope you've seen some of my sass and some of my bold ideas tonight. I'm going to bring 1,000 doctors back to Alberta. I'm going to make sure that kids can breathe the air on a warm summer's day, and I'm going to make sure that people can afford to pay their rent and that there are fewer people living on the streets. I'm Sarah Hoffman. I'm a very proud New Democrat, and I am ready to lead our party. I've knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors with you. I've raised money with you. I've recruited candidates and volunteers with you. And you are the reason, all of you in this room, why we've won Lethbridge 3 times in a row, Lethbridge West. You're the reason why we're going to win Lethbridge East. You're the reason why we're going to win both seats in Medicine Hat. And then Cardston, I'm coming for you next.
Thank you. Gil?
As a union leader in Alberta, I'm used to being underestimated. When I was co-chair of the province's Energy Diversification Advisory Committee, we had a world-renowned business investment guru on the committee named Leo DeBeaver.
Yes.
After working with me for a few months, he said, "You're not what I expected." And then together we went on to make recommendations that attracted billions of dollars in investment and created thousands of jobs for Albertans. Something similar happened to me last year when I worked with our unions in oil and gas and construction and manufacturing to develop a blueprint for diversifying the Alberta economy. I took that report to Ottawa and I presented it to Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, and after working with me for a few months, she said, "You're not what I expected." Then she introduced investment tax credits that will attract billions of dollars in investment and create thousands of jobs here in Alberta. And just this week, on Tuesday, in Medicine Hat, I made a presentation on our vision for economic diversification, and after that presentation, a rock-ribbed conservative who works in oil and gas came up to me, and you know what he said? "You're not what I expected." To win working Albertans back, to win outside the big cities, we have to be not what they expect, and it might just be the job for an Alberta farm kid who grew up to be a union leader who has made a career out of being not what people expect.
Thank you. Naheed.
Gil, you're not what I expected. I grew up here. I grew up very poor in a first-generation family that didn't have anything. And we had strong family, we had strong faith, we had strong values, but everything we have today is because this community in this province believed in us. Public education, public health care, public transit, public libraries, even public swimming pools. All of that contributed to me being who I am now. And yes, I did win 3 elections as mayor of Calgary. Yes, I have more votes than any other candidate in Alberta, first, second, and third place. But that's not what this is about. What this is in fact about is telling Albertans that we can dream of better. And what is amazing for me in the last 6 weeks is the thousands and thousands of Albertans across this province who've come not for this handsome face, but because they feel a sense of optimism again in a politics that doesn't have space for it today. My campaign slogan is "For Alberta, for all of us." But the key words are not Alberta and all as I thought they would be. The word that has the most power for our friends and neighbors in Alberta is that tiny word "for." We've been conditioned to be against Ottawa, against each other, against LGBTQ kids, against frontline workers, nurses, and teachers and doctors. And it's time for us to be for one another, for Alberta, for all of us.
Thank you. Kathleen.
Thank you, Loa. This has been an incredible conversation about the kind of future we want to build. For me, the conversation is very personal. It's about the world I want for my daughter. We build that world by working together. After all, there are no shortcuts, especially for New Democrats in Alberta. No one knows that better than my campaign co-chair, Shannon Phillips, and the incredible team right here in Lethbridge. As your leader, I will do what I have always done. I will stand shoulder to shoulder with you and knock on thousands of doors. And when we get to those doors, we will have a real offer on the economy because our ideas on the economy are better. The UCP is telling us that this is what a good economy feels like, but their story is a lie. Too many young people have given up on their dream of home ownership. And this generation may lead shorter lives than the one before them. My daughter has big dreams and a big imagination. I see it in her eyes every single day. She deserves better. All of our kids do. No matter what brought you here tonight, I ask for your support. With me as your leader, we will fight for every inch, every single day. Because our children are counting on us, and there is nothing more tenacious than a mother fighting for her kids.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all the candidates, and thank you again for being so respectful. And I want to wish you all the best of luck. And if we can have one more final applause for our candidates. Thank you. I have some closing remarks here. Thank you very much. Wow, standing ovation for everyone. Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for coming out this evening and driving to the city. I know some of you have driven a long ways to be here this evening to support the candidates. I'd also like to thank our Lethbridge councillor, Jeff Carlson, who began this evening. Our councillor, I still see him here, Travis, one of our ceremonialists, Travis Platted Hair. Thank you so much for starting us off in a good way. I want to thank all of those that joined us online on our live streams, both on Facebook and YouTube. And also remember this, that the voting for the NDP leadership race begins on June 3rd. Voting packages will be mailed to each NDP member, and it will have certain information on how to vote by mail, by snail mail, by phone, and using online voting as well as an option with a unique PIN for each voter. Voting ends and the results will be announced on June 22nd. So please join us in Calgary at the Hyatt Regency for the NDP leadership premiere. So once again, I would like to thank all of you for joining us, and in my language, Getamatsin. Thank you.
But it's also not quite right. Because the voter turnout is higher. But if you got the percentage I got.